Welcome to Down on the Corner, episode 39, the opening day. Well, yeah, edition tonight. We'll talk about that a little later. We have a great guest tonight, former pitcher, part of the Mets Generation K, Bill Pulsipher. From the highs of a dominant rise through the minors to the challenges of injuries, mental health battles, and baseball journeys that took him across Major League Baseball, independent ball, and beyond. Bill has seen it all. We'll dive into his career for life lessons and what he's up to now. So, Bill, first of all, thanks for joining us. I always appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it as well.
As always, I'll start the show off with questions from Bill. I ask you guys keep yourself muted until we open the room for questions. So, Bill, you're drafted by your childhood team, the New York Mets, at just
Right.
17 years old. How tough was it to decide between going pro or taking the scholarship to Old Dominion at that point?
To be honest with you, once I got drafted as high as I did, although I was a decent student in school, I was never really a real student looking for creating new science or anything like that. I was always a baseball player first and a student second, unfortunately. But I did hold out as long as I possibly could, trying to weasel as much money as I possibly could, because Al Shirley signed 2 days after the draft and kind of put us all behind the eight ball a little bit, so to speak, for getting the money. But I kind of knew I was ready to start my baseball career professionally once I got drafted in the second round.
So it's interesting. Every kid that plays the game and plays high school ball is always looking for that next level, whether it be high school or pro ball. When they're in the moment as a 17-year-old and that parent also giving them advice, if you could go back and talk to your 17-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself at that point in your life?
Well, I would say, I mean, something my dad used to say to me all the time, which is don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's an old cliche, but it definitely rings true. I would also advise myself that nothing is guaranteed. And at 51 years old, I can say I've never met Superman in my life. And while I might have believed naively that I was Superman and a generational talent and a changing the game type of player, I couldn't have been more wrong. Unfortunately, I had the cruel joke played on me of where I had so much success early on that I kind of fed into it all the way into the major league. So I would say just keep your head level. I can't say I wasn't hungry, because I was always hungry, but just kind of expecting things to always go your way, because it kind of went that way for such a long period of my lifetime.
It's interesting because of all your early success, and you just mentioned that, and you the kind of hype that built up, and you can't be any more hyped than the legendary Generation K. Everything that was going on around that, getting Met fans all pumped up. Do you think those expectations were set unfairly high for you guys, and there was no winning, no matter what you guys did?
I mean, I've been asked this question numerous times, and I always say the same thing. The only expectations, the only pressure, the only thing I ever felt was what I had always put on myself. Because, like I said prior, that my naiveness of believing that I was different, I was special, and I was, obviously, if you make it to the major leagues, you are a little bit different than the majority of kids that you play with. And I just fed into it myself. And it's anything that was being said about me Generation K wise is something that I believed anyway. I believed, and when I was 4 years old, I was telling my parents that I was going to play Major League Baseball. And I remember getting into it with teachers in school when they were telling me about the aptitude tests. I was like, well, it doesn't matter what I put down, because I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player. So I always kind of believed it. And then with the success came the articles, came the news, so you just kind of, at the time, living it as a young man, just believe that that's the way it was supposed to be anyway. So I didn't feel any expectations put on me by anybody else, or pressure put on me by anybody else. It was just everything that I kind of wanted and expected for myself.
It's interesting that you mentioned that on an aptitude, you wrote that you were going to be a baseball player and nothing else. That was always on your mind. How important is that singular focus on that goal? And obviously, listen, I mean, we've spoken about this on this show numerous times, that if you took every single player who played this game since its inception, it wouldn't even fill the lower bowl of Citi Field.
Right.
So that expectation is like the 0.001% of the entire world. But how
Right.
important is that mindset to get you to where you got?
I definitely think the love, the passion, and the desire has to be there. and it has to be pretty much on top of your list. But I think that with my obsession about it, and then knowing kind of my, unfortunately later on after, kind of knowing my family background a little bit, that the obsessiveness about it, when I did end up getting injured, and that was kind of, I don't want to say my downfall, because I played for a lot longer after that and was able to make it back and forth to the big leagues numerous times. But I definitely think that if you don't have the love, you don't have the passion. And I know from raising my kids that what people think the love and the passion is not necessarily always the case. I would say maybe I was a little bit too in love and too passionate about it, that when things kind of finally did take a little bit of a turn, and unfortunately it wasn't until the big leagues that I had to kind of learn that there's going to be failures, that it kind of it hit me differently, I would say. But you got to have the love, man. You got to love it first.
I'm so glad you brought that up because, I see a lot of kids that all have these aspirations of playing college ball. And sometimes, listen, it's a grind no matter what, to be in the gym, to take hundreds of ground balls, to throw side bullpens. You see a lot of students. Can you see the difference in a kid that you think has both the talent, the drive, the love, and the passion, as opposed to a kid that just might have the talent, but doesn't have what I feel is the most important ingredient to go with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that I try to describe it to my kids that I work with and my clients is they're baseball players, and then there are kids that play baseball, and you decide which one you are. And I was a baseball player through and through. It was the first thing I thought about when I got up in the morning, and I couldn't wait to sit down. And obviously I'm old enough now that I sat down with the box scores and looked at the box scores. And then I would watch the games. I had WTBS, I had WOR, I had WGN, and I had Home Team Sports. So I watched games nonstop, and I would then go out with the wiffle ball and that and try to mimic everything that I saw. I had the Braves line up down both left-handed and right-handed, how to stand and how to throw like the pitchers did. And you definitely see the difference. They're fewer and further between. And I think part of that, people like to get mad that Latin America's taken over the game and all that. Well, I think that when you look at the passion and the drive that you see in some of the other countries, it's not necessarily there. Maybe not so much, in Long Island and that. And there's other places, hot spots in the country, California, Texas, Florida, where the love and the passion is still there. But I don't see it as much in Long Island as I know how I felt. But again, I say I was obsessed. But there's definitely baseball players and kids that play baseball.
So your season in Binghamton's legendary. It's capped by the
94.
no-hitter, 94.
Yes.
It's capped by the no-hitter in the Eastern League playoffs. Take me back to that night, and what do you remember most about that?
Oh, it's funny. I was just thinking about it the other day because I saw Joey Cora, and I had a stretch. And I'll get to that real quick. I had a stretch in Puerto Rico one year where I had a no-hitter into the ninth, and Ray Ordonez, who was the shortstop in the 94 game, ended up getting a hit to break up the no-hitter after an error was made. And then my next start, I went out, gave up a triple to Cora to start the game, and then retired 27 hitters in a row. So I was just thinking about it the other day. What do I think about that? I know that it was the only game going around anymore because the strike was going on. I specifically remember a line drive hit off of my pitching toe on my left foot and ricocheting right to Ray to save the no-hitter. And then I remember coming up in the top of the ninth inning and telling the catcher, just throw 3 balls over. I'm not going to swing at anything. I'm ready to get back out there and try to get this over with. And I commenced to swing at the very first pitch. And I don't remember if I fouled it off or something, but I remember the catcher saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Don't worry, that's it." I was a little excited. And then remember Frank Jacobs catching the pop fly in the infield, my first baseman at the time, and then just being swept up by my teammates. Obviously, it was a big game. We had lost the first game of the final series against Harrisburg, so it was kind of a must-win game in a way to get us back into the series. And we went on to win the Eastern League Championship, and one of the greatest summers of my life.
So I want to go back to what you said about your dream, your focus, and just that singular drive to make the majors. Take me back to that day. Your first forget about making the team, but the first time you actually toe the rubber, Shea Stadium. What's going through your head?
I can't believe I'm here. Shea was such a big, big, big stadium. And I remember I came up on a Friday and pitched on Saturday. And I remember walking out for batting practice on Friday. and walking through the dugout. I tell this to a lot of people, just walking out there for the first time and seeing how big that place was. And obviously it was the place that I grew up rooting for, that ball club. You know, it was really easy to be a Mets fan in the mid to late 80s. It was very simple. When you're a kid growing up, obviously you gravitate. And then just thinking that I'm standing on the same mound where my idol Dwight Gooden went out and did such great things that he did. What was going through my head? I'm here. This is what I've always wanted to do. I'm living the dream, playing for the team that I loved growing up. And the knees were knocking. I had a crazy first inning. I gave up 5 runs in the first inning, and went on to go 7 innings that day. That's something that will probably never happen again in the history of the game. And I ran into Bugsy, Brett Butler, about 15 years after that. I can't believe, and it might even have been longer. I can't believe it's going to be 30 years this year too.
Wow.
But I ran into him in St. Lucie behind the outfield on field 4, which is the field closest to the minor league clubhouse. It's not in field 4 anymore because Buck changed the numbers, but it's still field 4 to me. I ran into Bugsy, and he looks right at me and he says, I should have had those 2 balls in the first inning, because I had 2 balls that were kind of hitting the gap that he could have caught, should have caught, would have caught, whatever. It doesn't matter at this point. But, 15, 20 years later, for him to come out and that's the first thing he says, it made a mark on him too, remembering that day as well. So it was pretty cool.
It's amazing the memories baseball players have of games and situations. It really is incredible.
Yeah.
I want to bring you back because you mentioned being a fan of the team, and obviously we take our name from the great Ralph Kiner and the KINER'S Korner. Yeah. Growing up, being the baseball fan you were, how important was KINER'S Korner to your fandom?
Oh, I mean, the fact that I got a chance to be on KINER'S Korner and see Ralph Kiner in person, it's fantastic, and it's great that you have this carrying on the legacy of such a fine program. And Ralph Kiner was baseball. KINER'S Korner was baseball. And, it wouldn't be a Mets game, home game, especially without having KINER'S Korner after. And, he made it very special. And he was a special man and a special ball player and a special broadcaster. And just, it's legendary. It's historic.
Do you remember what your parting gift was?
I don't. It might have been a watch. I don't even remember.
Probably the Arbitron. Yeah, for sure. Obviously, injuries play a major role in your career, from the Tommy John surgery, back issues. What was the hardest part of dealing with those setbacks, both physically and mentally? Yet you see guys going through it. It's a little different now. Like a guy like Drew Smith, is paid to do his rehab. The Mets signed him this year, knowing that he's not going to pitch. But what were those drawbacks for you, like mentally and physically?
Well, physically, obviously, it was just getting back healthy again. In my day, when they did the Tommy John, they put you in a half cast right away, where your arm is locked at a 90-degree angle for, I want to say, a month or so before they take that off. And then they put you in the little robot thing with the little robot brace, and then you start to make your arm, your motion of your arm, it starts to come back. Nowadays, they put those guys in it right away, so they get back to moving their arm right away. So just getting the arm to straighten out, to bend all the way again, that was difficult. And then once you start the rehab because of the atrophy, just trying to build back the muscle mass and all that, and then when it came down to throwing, it came to holding the reins back enough to not try to rush everything. That was so hard. And I remember I had a couple of setbacks from doing too much. We tear some scar tissue or something like that. And I remember traveling with the team in '96, and I wanted to be the guy that threw the ball to the first baseman when he came in after getting the first out. Mentally wise, it was just the anticipation of trying to get back. And, I made it all the way back to spring training in '97 and had a tremendous spring training. And threw 34 innings, which is almost about twice as much as the guys throw nowadays in spring training, and was told, not even told, I read it in a news article. I was at the local 7-Eleven and saw a news article there that said that Pulsipher and Isringhausen will be starting on rehab assignments in AAA. And I'm thinking to myself, now, wait a minute. I've been working out 6 days a week at St. Lucie with Bob Apodaca leading into spring training. There's been zero talk of me not making this club. I just threw 34 innings in spring training and threw well. Why do I need to be going on a rehab assignment? Because I came from the old school of you don't lose your job to injury. So I was of the mind frame that if I come back and in spring training I pitch well, it's going to be my job. And lo and behold, I go on the rehab assignment and something just completely changed. Something I've never felt. I remember looking back now, I think about the free throw line in high school, maybe having a little bit of anxiety, or maybe the first hitter or so of a game, that it was just something that kind of took over from there. And that's when the anxiety and depression battle started, was basically rehab assignment just coming off of Tommy John.
Hmm. Baseball is finally paying a little more attention to mental
Oh yeah,
health, but back in the 90s, it
no
was
chance.
rarely talked about at all.
Yeah.
You've been very open about your struggles with depression and anxiety. How much do you think more mental health resources back then would have changed things for you and others? Because, let's face it, baseball is pitching, above and beyond the game of baseball is such a high pressure situation
Oh
too,
yeah.
that, those pressures, only heighten anxiety.
Oh yeah.
So, what do you think the resources that are available now, if they were available to you then, would have done for your career?
Well, I think that it was in the baby stages, the infant stages. And I did talk with Dr. Alan Lands, who was the team psychologist. The hard part was, and I'm kind of going through this with a client of mine right now, is trying to getting the first steps of kind of admitting that something was going on. And it took me a while before I finally admitted that something was going on. And it was during that rehab assignment. And at that point in time, I told them, I'm like, listen, there's something wrong. I can't be on the mound. And because of where they were at in the stages of trying to deal with these types of things, they decided, well, let's send him to A ball, and have him play in a less pressure packed place in A ball. Lo and behold, I'm still younger than 80-90% of the guys on the team in A ball. And it's a league that I destroyed 2-3 years ago, prior to that. So would it have been different? I think everybody would have had to have been a little bit different. I would have had a little bit to be a little bit more accepting right away, and then stuck to it, because I got on medication relatively quickly after that. But then I went through my whole career kind of on meds, doing well. Okay, I'm fine. Off meds, struggle, back on meds, and never kind of stuck with it as much as I probably should have, which would then lead to, self-medication and shit like that off the field, where you're just digging yourself in a hole in a spiral. But I think that the understanding of the ball club, if I would have said, listen, I can't be on the mound right now, we need to get this ironed out, maybe it would have been different if we would have just gotten away from the field, worked on that, and then worked our way back into it again.
So after bouncing around some major league teams, you walk away from the game for a while. And I remember reading the article about you working as a groundskeeper.
Yep.
What did the time away from the game teach you about yourself, and more importantly, about life outside of, the microscope of baseball?
Well, it's so crazy, because obviously I go from the number one prospect in the organization to working on the grounds crew there, and I always thank Tommy Bose for giving me that opportunity, and because I was in a bad place at the time, and Tommy Bose, I did my wife Michelle, she said, you need to get a job, you need to go do something, and I was like, Tommy, man, I need to get a job. Can you give me a job? And he said, I'll give you a job, but the only way I'm going to give you this job is if you spend the morning up at the minor league clubhouse working out. And the Mets were always great with allowing me to do that, and then come out in the afternoons and work the rest of the day out on the grounds crew, and cut the grass and that. What did I learn? I learned that, there's more to life than just baseball, and there's going to be life after baseball. And it's not going to always be easy either. And, I've always said that baseball is kind of a reflection of life. There's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, and there's going to be everything in between. So I think that going and doing that, and being humble enough, and having to, I'm not going to even say swallow my pride, because not even to not be so prideful that I could go back there where I was the cock of the walk, so to say, and go out and do it. But I also still had that belief in myself that I can put this back together again, and make it back to the major leagues, and salvage a career.
The Long Island Ducks become a huge part of your story as well, as they have for so many former Mets, whether it be Kevin Baez, Buddy Harrelson, Gary Carter. Just so many guys have been in that organization.
Edgardo Alfonso.
Unzo, right. What did that, being part of their first championship as well, what did the Ducks mean to your story?
Well, obviously, it meant another opportunity, and it also meant another opportunity for me in front of a fan base who already knew who I was, and were going to be acceptive of me, because that's one thing I've always said about Mets fans, is they've always been, regardless of good, bad, or indifferent, Mets fans for the most part, I've been pretty much warmly welcomed back into the good graces of the fans. And it was an opportunity to go pitch. It was an opportunity to pitch in front of 6,000 people a night, and that's how many seats that place held. It was an opportunity to play a high level of baseball, to compete, to try to get back, into organized baseball, and then as it turns out, back into the major leagues. It was a chance to be around baseball people, and Buddy was a big part of that then. Bud is still around. May he rest in peace. And just an opportunity to go out there. Obviously, you don't make any money playing for the Ducks. It's about the love of the game and the opportunity to put the uniform on and to hopefully have something come out of that.
So I'm bouncing around a little bit because I'm doing this show for 39 different episodes. The guys in the Zoom room get mad because I take up all their questions. So I'm going to leave some stuff for them to ask you, because that's what this is also about.
All right.
You've been a pitching coach and instructor for years now.
Yeah.
What's the biggest lesson you try to pass on to young pitchers that are your clients?
Well, I always lean to this because I got told after I injured myself that, well, it's the way that you threw is the reason why you injured yourself. So I really, really focus on trying to understand the mechanics and trying to move your body the same way and repeat yourself the same way. And I like to focus on commanding the baseball first. And unfortunately, in this day and age, you're going to lose some clients that way, because everybody, for some reason, believes that there can be a way of taught to throw 100 miles an hour, which couldn't be any further from the truth. 1% of the population will ever throw 90 miles an hour, and that still stands to this day, regardless of what you do. I think that as young kids, and I mostly deal with, junior high school into high school and some college kids. I think that, and I have a great example with Joey Hiller here at Center Moriches, who's a senior in high school here, who was an undersized kid. And I started with him in seventh grade. And I told him, I said, by the time you're a junior, you're going to be one of the best pitchers around here. And sure enough, he's graduated up into every year 2 or 3 miles an hour. And he's throwing up into the upper 80s now. And he's going to go on to play D1 baseball at Quinnipiac next year, which if you would have seen Joey at 6th grade, you would have said, nah, no way. There's no way this kid. But I knew that with his competition and his heart, and then my dedication to teaching him how to pitch first, use your mechanics and pitch first, and we'll worry about velocity as we get down the road, and teaching little techniques that I learned from guys like Al Jackson and Randy Neiman and Rick Waits, and the stuff that I learned from these crafty guys that were able to stick around for a long time. That's my philosophy. My philosophy is understand the mechanics, learn how to pitch, and we'll worry about velocity down the road.
Look about an undersized pitcher that got the most out of his career, Al Jackson.
I mean,
man.
come on.
Wow.
Come on. You see the guy, you're like, no way that guy played 19 years in the major league.
It's unbelievable.
Nobody knew more about pitching than Al Jackson.
Yeah. Speaking about young guys, your sons, Liam and Leighton, which I just love the fact that their initials are LHP. Clearly, baseball is in your family's DNA. How does it feel watching them carve out their own baseball paths?
Well, it's been tough. I'm going to say that, obviously, because playing baseball with anxiety is very, very difficult. Having sons playing baseball, and I know I have anxiety, is very, very difficult to watch. They both were very, very successful. Leighton, unfortunately, was dealt a raw hand with health throughout his career. He's supposed to be at Central Connecticut playing baseball right now, if not in pro ball. But he just had one injury after the next. But got to be the starting shortstop as a freshman on a state championship team with Center Moriches. And Liam obviously had a fantastic high school career, won a state title as well. They won back-to-back state titles, Liam's senior year and Leighton's freshman year. Liam went on to Stony Brook, where it didn't work out the first year, and then COVID hit, which kind of messed up his trajectory a little bit. And then he went on to Queens, had a great career there, was able to help win them their first conference championship since 1998, which was pretty darn cool. And then I want to say this the right way, but unfortunately, he made the Ducks last year out of spring training. And him being a young player and maybe not understanding the level of baseball that the Ducks is, might have bit off a little bit too much that he can chew, and didn't start off well. And he was released and then went on to go play in the Pioneer League briefly, and then he decided, it wasn't for him. But I know that at some point in time, I feel like because things got off to such a rough start for him and he bit off more than he can chew, that I'm hoping that he will give himself another opportunity if not this year, the next year, to pick the ball back up again and see what happens, because I don't want him to regret that he didn't give himself at least a fair shake.
So looking at today's game, are there pitchers that you like look and say, if the game's televised, I have to watch this? And is there one pitcher that you would have loved to face off against in a pitching duel?
Well, I mean, Jake DeGrom obviously has been the most dominant pitcher of recent time, and it's crazy because how simple he actually keeps it. He really just throws a four-seam fastball or occasional two-seam fastball, and then he calls it a slider, but it's really just a cutter. But just his ability to dominate the down and away portion of the strike zone over and 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 over. You're just insane. And it's almost like he said, I don't care if they tell me I'm going to have to throw a curveball and a changeup. I'm going to show you I don't need to do it. And obviously, he's had some injury problems, but when you're throwing that hard and you got such long levers like he does, arms and legs, that it's only, the human body's not meant to do that. But he's been can't miss TV for me. I'm holding out hope that there's somehow a late season trade deadline trade for Jake again, and he can come back and put number 48 on again and thrill us all again. But I would say Jake's the top guy for me, and can't miss television. He was the closest thing to me when can't miss for when I was a youngster.
And lastly, in your career, you played in an era where there were so many great baseball players. Who was the guy that you got amped up to pitch against, and walk me through some of those at bats that you remember the most?
Well, it's crazy to remember exactly at bats, but I do remember obviously the quote unquote home run king. You can have the argument, that's for another day, but I did get to strike Bonds out twice, and to be able to say that you were able to strike out the guy that hit more balls over a fence at the major league level than anybody it's obviously a feather in your cap. But then you can also turn around and say not many people have given up a home run to David Eckstein or Ray Sanchez. So I'm kind of a little bit in both of those books, where I struck out the greatest home run hitter of all time, but also gave up home runs to guys that probably had no business hitting it twice and hitting it over the fence.
And turn it over to the Zoom.
For any player, back in those times, which obviously there was so much hype surrounding you guys, that you either played with or were facing, that you were just so in awe of that it sort of took you off your game?
Well, I'll say this, and obviously the first time you face any of those guys, the first time it's kind of like, holy shit, I'm actually facing Mark McGwire, or I'm actually facing whoever it may be. I do remember a specific moment when Primetime was standing at home plate. Deion Sanders was standing at home plate for the first time I ever faced him. And I couldn't stop looking down at his cleats, trying to figure out what in the world are these Nike cleats that this man has on, because I've never seen those before. Those are so cool. And as it turns out, they were Deion's. But I grew up such a baseball fan too, that I was definitely at first kind of in awe, but then knowing that I'm a competitor and I'm going to try to light the world on fire by trying to strike this sucker out.
Awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Michael Tuller, you were next. Unmute and go ahead.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
I'm good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So my question really has to do with you putting on your pitching coach, your client hat.
Right.
I heard an interview with Tom Glavine, and they asked him if he thought he would be drafted in today's game. And he said, yeah, because he was a lefty, but Maddox, he said, probably wouldn't.
You know what?
Go ahead. But my question to you is, do you have guys coming up, that you're working with that are control guys and not power guys? And do you tell them, well, you got to get your fastball up, otherwise they won't take a look at you? Or do you
know what? I don't sell major leagues to anyone. Okay. I haven't had the opportunity yet to work with somebody that's made it into the major leagues. I have had plenty of kids get into college. And the way that I try to think about it is, I'm going to try to make you the best pitcher you possibly can at a young age, because like Mark talked about early on, it's really the 0.000001% that go there. And nobody cares how hard you throw ball four. So my best thing is to try to make you the very, very best high school pitcher you can possibly be with the opportunity to go on to play college baseball. And then anything after that is just going to be icing on the cake. I do have a nice left-handed pitcher who's a junior right now. He's sitting in the mid to upper 80s. He would obviously need a nice big jump his next year, but I don't believe in 7-8 mile an hour velocity jumps. I just don't believe that it's a thing. I think that the human body, and everybody's human body is a little bit different, is kind of, how could Pedro Martinez could throw 98 miles an hour? He's 165 pound, 175 pounds wet and could throw at 98 miles an hour. So my whole thing is let's focus on being the very best around in high school and see what can come after that.
Up a good point. And I don't know if this is, an epidemic on Long Island. And I know all these kids want to play college ball, and all these parents, and they're all chasing, whether it be through Perfect Game or all these different tournaments. And, so much has changed due to the portal. Junior college now, you don't lose eligibility unless you're like the number one in your state at your position. No colleges are looking at you anymore. How do you, tell the parents, to maybe reel back the expectations and what's realistic? And it's also hard because it is your business and you need the clients, but these clients also have to be somewhat realistic to what their end goal is.
Well, this is the way I try to explain it to my clients when it comes to the colleges and that. And Senator Riches, I'll use them as an example because they're a small school, but a great baseball program that wins over and over and over again. I try to say, I want you to, as a parent, think back to the kids that have came in the years past from your program and the schools that those kids have went to. And then honestly look in the mirror and tell yourself and ask yourself, where do you see your kid fit into where those kids have went on to go and play college baseball? And that should help you with your evaluation as to where you feel like what schools should you be looking at St. Joe's, or should you be looking at LSU? Should you be looking at Stony Brook, or should you be looking at, whatever school it may be? So I think that's the way I go about it. I try to be honest with people. Obviously baseball is competitive here in the Northeast and on Long Island, but it's obviously not like it is in other parts of the country that are hotbeds. A lot of people, because we have two major league ball clubs in town, have a hard time kind of separating the differences throughout the country. And I think that what I've seen over the years is quite a few kids go to a school where they probably shouldn't have went to, and either one of two things happens. They go there and they rarely ever play, or they go there and they end up transferring, and then their story gets a little, nobody wants to go to a school and say they had to leave the school and go somewhere else. So that's my thought is I like to be honest with them and tell them this is probably where they're going to fit in, and judge against the guys that came before you. Because if you're a good enough player that you're going on to play college baseball, you were probably around your freshman or sophomore year on the varsity level, and you saw the guys that were moving on. So just be honest. You got to be honest with yourself, and I try to be honest with them. But I also try to push as hard as I can to try to develop so they can end up with the best situation they could possibly have.
Nice. All right, Goobs, you're up. Unmute.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
What's up, Gooby? How are you?
Good. So, a couple of years ago in Syracuse, I meant to ask you this, and I just slipped my mind. I live in Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Yes, sir.
And I know you played here. You got any memories, good or bad?
Good. All good. I mean, honestly, I remember it's the first time I ever played on a team that went 500. And I felt like, man, we're losing all the time. Because I always played on fairly successful teams through Little League, through high school, through, Babe Ruth and American Legion baseball. So we were always winners. And obviously at professional baseball, if you're playing 500 baseball, you're doing all right. You're not doing terrible. You're not doing great. But I just remember, man, I feel like we're losing all the time. But Wacona National Park is always going to be a special place to me. Yeah. Obviously, remembering when the umpire didn't know whether a pitch was thrown or not towards home plate, you knew that the sun delay it was time for the sun delay. And you also knew that there was no one ever going to be able to hit the ball out to right center field. But I have very, very fond memories of my summer in Pittsfield, and I wouldn't be who I am, and my baseball journey wouldn't have been what it is without spending that summer there.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you in Syracuse this summer.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, me too. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
was one of my biggest regrets. I took a team to the Dan Duquette tournament, and one of the games was supposed to be played at Wacona Park, but that game got rained out, so we couldn't
It's
play there.
historic. It really is.
Yeah,
It's historic.
I know. It is
And we
unbelievable.
called it obviously Wacona National Park because of how big right center field is. But it's historic. You know, it really is. It's that whole league, the New York Penn League, was great. You know, I remember going to Auburn, which was at the time the oldest ballpark in America, and the visiting clubhouse had dirt floors.
Wow.
And this was in 1992, you know, so long ago, but not that long ago that you think there would have been dirt floors.
That's amazing. So you guys called it Wacona National Park because of how deep right field
was. So huge.
So if a pitcher gave up a home run to right field, I'm sure he'd never live that down.
You would never. It had to be every bit of 400 and at least 450, if not 480 feet. Huge.
Okay, so to answer Joel Sunshine's question, so there is the technical way of raising your hand, but we also accept old school. So Joel, he's saying me. So Joel, unmute and go ahead. Hopefully you can figure out how to unmute. There you go.
I literally, when you said unmute, I'm like, I have no idea.
Wait a minute. I thought we got the astronauts back from space.
I'm out of space. So can I tell you? Thank you, Elon Musk, for bringing me back. Just kidding, Pulse.
Yeah.
So, Pulse, great to see you. And I will
Nice
say,
to see you.
what I love about Pulse as an instructor, I learned how to play golf with my big brother, who's a pain in the butt, but he's a much better golfer than me. And when I wanted to learn, he goes, listen, I can be nice to you, or I can teach you how to play golf. And after every swing for about 3 years, he would critique, positively or negatively, what my swing was. And some people observing that found that annoying, but I learned how to play golf in a hurry. And Pulse is not one of these guys that sits and watches his students for a half hour and then at the end gives them 3 or 4 lines. He's given instruction after every pitch, and it's mostly positive. And so he's amazing, and I really appreciate him, and I appreciate his friendship.
Thank you,
Pulse. I love talking baseball with you. So I'm going to give you one fastball down the plate if I can.
All right.
Talk to all of us about what you think of the modern day catchers generally.
Oh boy.
And what you think of Alvarez as a 22-year-old so far.
All right, you're setting me up a little bit, but I'm going to be honest, like you know that I always am. I personally would not like to throw to the pitchers nowadays. I think that there's far too much moving around. There is definitely not. There's not a target being given, and if it is, it's very late and it's very brief. They say that they're telling guys to steal strikes. But I'm a firm believer in the types of strikes you don't have to steal are actual strikes. So baseball being a hand-eye coordination sport, if you can just give me a glove for me to coordinate my hands and my eyes with, I feel like I will be much better at hitting it, and you will not have to steal it. The framing of pitches, the way that I look at it is a picture has a frame around it. So if I am framing something, I am catching something that is just outside of that picture, and I am bringing it to the frame, which is the edge. So I think it's a little obnoxious with the pulling balls that may be 6 to 8 inches off the plate to the middle of the strike zone. And obviously the umpires have been snipped a little bit on what they can and can't say to the players, because I know Frank Pulley would have leaned over right away and told the catcher, young Alvarez, to knock that shit off, because you're the only person you're embarrassing is yourself, and you're trying to make me look bad. So let's knock that off. I would think that the guys that teach catching nowadays didn't pitch much. What do I think about Alvarez? I think that he falls into that category. I don't like that he moves around so much. I'm going to say that he falls into that category because he's very young, and that is what he has been taught. I would also say this about Alvarez is he's obviously a lightning rod, hard worker, enthusiastic, go-getter that has a very, very bright future in front of him if he can get healthy, stay healthy. And then I saw it last year, and I remember being there at the game when I was promoting the fantasy camp week 3, saying the improvements that I saw with him, calming his movements down, giving an earlier target. And it seemed as the game towards the end of the year last year, when it really got ramped up again, the playoffs and the race to the playoffs, he kind of got back excited again. So it'll be interesting to see him develop. but there's so much to like about him. Obviously, we got to get him hitting more consistently, but nobody works harder than him, and you got to love that about him.
What about the way catcher's set up now on one knee? That
Well,
doesn't give him flexibility to get anything that's
I
in the
don't get it.
dirt.
I really don't get it. And again, it goes back to stealing strikes for the umpire to call strikes. So I never thought I would say this, but part of me is saying I can't wait for there to be, and I don't really mean this. I can't wait for there to be an automated strike zone to see what the catchers do. Will they go back to setting up normally? Because they're saying they go down on that knee to steal the pitch that's down and away from the umpire to make him get a better look at it, to say where it's a ball or strike. I can't see how you can have runners on base and guys down on the knee. I don't get it, but it's not for me to say anymore. I will be interested to see when they do go to the automated strike zone if catchers go back to a more traditional approach.
All right, Larry. Oh, go ahead, Joel. Sorry.
I was going to say, Pulse and I have talked a lot about this, but Gary Carter, who may have been underrated as a defensive catcher, McCarver raved about him for years.
Well, look at the target he gave.
He gave you the amazing target. He would what they called framing pitches back then was much different than what they're trying to do now, moving their glove. And he was never down on one knee. So that's a pretty good guy to watch.
No, it's amazing. I say this to Liam, my son, all the time, that it's amazing that for 100 and something years we had it all wrong. I just we had it all wrong. Who would have known that the guys that never really played that are now taking over the game, they know it better than the guys that passed it down over the century plus of learning how to do things, that we've had it wrong the whole time. Who would have thought?
That's so funny you say.
Thank you.
It's so funny you say that because down in spring training, I'm covering the team, and I see them go through the normal ritual of batting practice, which hasn't changed forever.
Right.
But I noticed that, Xavi is doing the, get him in, get him over, hit and run, suicide squeeze, butcher boy, So I go over to Jesse Winker. I go, dude, why do you guys bother to do hit and run? When was the last time a hit and run was called in this game of baseball anymore? I go, it's a lost art, and you guys practice it. Maybe someone should call it. And Jesse goes, that's above my pay grade, buddy.
Yeah, you want to leave that one alone.
Yeah.
You got to be careful when you're still playing, what you say. And I should be careful too, because I wouldn't mind getting back in the game some point in time. But it's obviously a much different ball game, and there are some definite art forms and framing pitches and making the pitcher look good is a totally different approach. And obviously the bunt and the hit and run and the pitch out and the suicide squeeze and all these things are definitely a little bit of a lost art.
All right, Larry, unmute. Go ahead.
Hey, Pulse, how you doing?
Larry Legend, how are you, my friend?
Okay, two easy layup questions, two of them. First one is, what's your favorite uniform? Second one is, tell us about Kangaroo Court. You were part of it this year.
Yeah, well, obviously the best uniform, I think, arguably in all of sports, is the pinstripe New York Mets home jersey with the number 21 on it. Right, Larry?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a beautiful, beautiful uniform. I think it's way better than and look, the Yankees uniform is beautiful, but we incorporate a third color with the white, the blue, and the orange, the history of the two colors. And then just the way it looks, it just pops. It's beautiful. I don't think there's a better uniform out there. Then the second question again was
Kangaroo Court. I heard
Kangaroo Court. Yes. Well,
you raised a lot of money. I heard.
Well, I helped out, and obviously we couldn't do it without the campers that are so generous and have always been so generous. It was an honor for me to be asked, obviously, to sit in for a legend. And Mr. Wine, Bobby Wine, is he's not just a Mets legend and a baseball legend and a Philly legend. He's a camp legend as well. So for me, after you being so generous and doing what you did for me to try to get me into camp, and for me to be able to sit back there with a gavel and a wig on and a robe and be able to bust everybody's balls, which I love doing. And we had a great time. I've been told that the videos have been sent out. I would like somebody to get me the week 3 rundown on how camp went, because I did get a lot of compliments after about what a great comedy show me and Figgy put on. And they said how organized it was, but I guess those guys, the week 3 guys, don't know me as well, that everything is pretty much flying by the seat of my pants. And that's what camp was, and it was. I mean, that's what court was, and it was a blast and an honor to be able to do it.
Awesome. All right, we'll take a few more because Pulse has been more than generous with this time. I told him 35 minutes. We're like at 45.
That's all right.
now.
I'm amongst friends. So
there
we're
you
good.
go. All right, Michael, go ahead. Caller.
Unmute. Yeah, we got to get you to week one.
We got
to get you to the senior circuit.
I know. No, I think the other way around is you need to come to the more fun club.
There you go.
And join week 2.
Anyway, I want to take you back a little bit because I've asked other people this question, and I love asking it. What I really want to know is we all dreamed about being ball players, but I lacked a little thing called talent. I just want to know. I know you said you knew as a 4-year-old you were going to go to the majors, but when did you actually know that you could get to that you could make it in the big leagues? Was it a coach that told you? Was it somebody? Was it, you recognizing your own performance? Hey, I can get these guys out. How did you know?
Well, obviously as a young player, I just thought it and believed it and wanted it. But I was one of those guys that was kind of a man child a little bit, and was always kind of stuck out a little bit from the rest of my team for the most part. I was lucky enough to play in high school with Brian Buchanan, who went on to be drafted by the Yankees out of college and play in the major league. So 2 guys from my high school team played, but I was still at that point in time in high school, even above and beyond what he was. And he turned out 3 years later to be a first-round draft pick. I would say when I got to professional baseball, and I was still able to put up the kind of numbers, maybe not quite as well as I did in high school, but still be able to put up quote unquote all-star numbers at each level that I played at, that it was kind of like, this is exactly what I had thought was going to happen. And there's no reason why I don't see that it would stop happening. And I just believed in it. I didn't play in my first year when I was drafted. I went to instruction league, played well in instruction league, and then I went to extended spring training onto the New York Penn League, and was an all-star against guys that were coming out of college as a kid that was only 1 year out of high school. So it was kind of then when I'm like, yeah, this is definitely going to happen as long as I can stay healthy and stay hungry.
I'm good. Week 1.
One of these days. I'll see you in Syracuse.
Shoulder issue. I got to get taken care of.
All right, get healthy.
Yeah.
Steve, do you have your hand raised again, or is that just hanging out there from before?
I do, but Sal had it up before me.
We end up with Sal because we got to give Sal time to go back to his whole memorabilia stash. Go ahead,
Steve. I'm going to defer to Steve Gruber because I saw his hand raised earlier. You coming, Steve?
Oh,
Pulse, how's it going?
Yeah. Good, Grooves. How are you, bud?
Good. You mentioned that you have one of your clients that's going to Quinnipiac. I went there a million years ago. We moved back to Connecticut, so I'm down the street from Quinnipiac again. Trivia question for you. Do you know the only player who went to Quinnipiac to ever make the major leagues? Hopefully your client is the second.
That would be nice, but I'll
give you a hint if you want a hint.
I do.
99.
He's a fantasy camp coach.
And wore number 99.
Turk went to Quinnipiac?
Yes.
Yeah.
Turk went to Quinnipiac.
Yep.
Yes.
And when you said 99, I was thinking either, and it wouldn't have mattered because he was there in 99, right? Turk was there in 99, or did he come in 2000? Anyway,
I think he was there. Yeah.
99.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yep.
Wow.
So there's your trivia for the night.
I love it. How's married life?
Going good. Megan says hi, and if you're up here watching one of your buddies, come over for dinner.
All right. And how's the puppy?
He's a lot, but he's good. So his name is Rookie, and he's getting big.
We'll take care of both of them.
Sounds good.
Look to hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's close out with Chico. Sal, go ahead.
All right, you were waiting for something, Mark. Hey,
yeah,
Bill.
let's see what you got. Wait, I got to set this up because Bill doesn't know this, but for 39 straight weeks, no matter who's on, Sal's got some, he's kind of I will say he's kind of lamed out recently because he's just pulling out old yearbooks. In the past, he's had autographed cards, he's had uniforms. Let's see what you got tonight,
I can't
Sal.
wait to see.
Well, this one here is from the Ducks scorecard.
Whoa.
Now, I went to this game because you were pitching.
Okay.
You're in my scorebook. Only problem is I must have been having a big beer because I never scored the game. But that, I went to see the game because you were pitching.
Well, thank you.
7 innings, 5 hits, 3 runs, 2 earned, 8 strikeouts, and a walk. And I was like,
That sounds like a Bill Pulsipher Ducks outing right there. 7 innings, 3 runs. That sounds about right.
question I have for you. When you and Wilson and Izzy were together and all the hype of Generation K, did you guys talk about it amongst yourselves and say, is this really happening to us? The expectations?
The crazy thing is I never actually played with Paul through the minor leagues at all. He was always just a little bit behind me, as was Izzy, but Izzy always kind of then came up until we were at AAA together. Because when the hype kind of started, I was in AA, Izzy was in A-ball with Paul. And then Izzy came up. And Izzy and I were very, very good friends, and we're still friends to this day. Did we talk about it? We believed it. We 100% believed it. And I think this goes back to what Mark was asking about the love and the belief. I think that the majority, and I think Izzy's a little bit different story than me because it kind of happened later for him, where I came up as a high round draft pick and was a good player right away and had people, had baseball cards right away. And I think that he bought into it, and he talks about this all the time, and he thanks me all the time for part of his career is because he always wanted to prove that he was better than me. So he always felt like he had to push himself to always try to outdo whatever I did. And I think that we just believed in it and we wanted it. And it was very unfortunate that we went through the injuries that we did. And it was unfortunate that the Yankees started to win the World Series every year and the Mets had to try to rush everything back. And everything kind of took a turn.
Well, it was awesome to see you pitch, and good luck to you. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do.
So, Bill, thank you so much for tonight. We really appreciate it. This is, we kind of subscribe to the Ralph Kiner thing where it's just baseball talk and it's not like those gotcha moments. And, I'm really proud of the Facebook group that we've built and the dialogue and the intelligent baseball conversation. And, some of the notes in the chat room and Joel Sunshine hit it right on the head. That you would be awesome on SNY when Keith or Daniel Murphy can't make it. Your insight and you've got that voice and you've got great stories. And Joel said, "Let's make it happen." It's a great idea. It never.
Well,
dawned on
I
me.
say this, and I do these things occasionally, and I don't like to blow my own horn or toot my own horn because I used to do that a lot. But I do enjoy talking to baseball. I do obviously enjoy the organization. And I've always thought that maybe there's going to be a time where something can come out of it. And who knows? That's kind of why I don't want to say that's kind of why I keep doing it, because I like to give back to the fans. And like I said, and you saw it tonight from the guys, and I know pretty much everybody. I've always been treated kindly, and I like to give back. And if you've been around a lot longer than I have around the organization, so you put out the good word that Bill isn't the crazy nincompoop that he once was when he believed he was hot shit, that maybe something could happen someday.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bill. I look forward to speaking to you down the road as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, and thanks for all the questions.